Welcome back. For today's Business Matters, we have Don Ma here with us. Don, how's it going?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Yeah, all right.
I'm good.
All right, so let me start off with a tip for your next breakfast, actually. And this is a big one because Treehouse Foods is recalling some products. An expanded recall on frozen toaster waffles, as well as Belgian waffles and pancake products due to a potential listeria threat. So the recalled products were sold nationwide and in Canada under several brand names. The FDA says no related illnesses have been confirmed. So listeria infections can be fatal for children and the elderly, as well as for those people with weak immune systems. For others, the symptoms include fever and nausea. Now, unemployment benefits claims dipped last week, but overall, the total number of Americans collecting benefits rose to its highest level since 2021. The Labor Department reports that it has soared to nearly 2 million. And this suggests that job seekers may be finding it harder to land a new role. As for jobless claims, applications fell by 15,000 for the week of October 19th. Weekly applications for jobless benefits are considered a measure for layoffs. Now, the investigation is still underway into the E. coli outbreak. The CDC says the specific ingredient linked to the illness has not been identified. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the details.
This week, the Centers for Disease Control said 49 people became ill after eating McDonald's popular Quarter Pounder. Foodborne illness attorney Bill Marler says that number is likely to increase as more cases are reported.
I think we're seeing the early stages of this outbreak. I mean, I think the fact that the CDC is calling it fast-breaking and dangerous, those are words that the CDC doesn't use lightly.
Most of the illnesses were reported in Colorado and Nebraska. The specific ingredient responsible has yet to be identified, but the CDC is focusing on onions and beef patties.
If this onion supplier was exclusive to McDonald's, that would give me a little more comfort that this outbreak is not going to expand. And I think, McDonald's should let the public know that.
McDonald's said it has worked closely with federal food safety regulators since late last week, when it was alerted to the potential outbreak. It's temporarily removing the Quarter Pounder from restaurants in Colorado, Kansas, Utah, and Wyoming. The fast food chain added that it was working with suppliers to meet demand for the coming week. McDonald's also told the CDC that it has removed onions and beef patties used for the Quarter Pounder in the affected states. Still, Marler says he'd expect a bit more concern from the fast food chain toward the consumer.
I haven't seen a lot of empathy towards the consumer. They've certainly talked about food safety and all that sort of stuff, but, nearly 50 of their customers have gotten sick from, one has died and one child has developed acute kidney failure.
Symptoms for E. coli include severe stomach cramps, diarrhea, and vomiting. Most people will start feeling sick 3 to 4 days after infection. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
A Colorado man has filed the first lawsuit over McDonald's E. coli outbreak linked to its Quarter Pounders. Eric Stelly's lawyer says he tested positive for E. coli after a few days of pain and is still recovering. The lawsuit accuses McDonald's of product liability, negligence, and breach of implied warranties. It was filed yesterday in a Cook County, Illinois court. The lawyer representing Stelly says he's also representing at least 10 other alleged victims of the outbreak. McDonald's has not commented on the lawsuit. The chain's USA president said yesterday that it's safe to eat at McDonald's and affected ingredients are probably out of the supply chain at restaurants. Now, another challenge for Boeing looks like striking workers have voted down its latest contract offer. Now the walkout continues, and so do Boeing's losses. Here's the report.
Boeing workers rejected a wage deal and chose to continue striking Wednesday, extending a month-long strike, damaging the company's finances.
Today, members voted to reject the company's latest offer by 64%.
The plane maker's latest offer had included a 35% wage hike over 4 years. Its rejection marks the second deal the union has voted down. The last offer was rejected by 95% of workers voting last month and triggered the strike. Workers have been frustrated with a decade of wages that have lagged behind inflation, while Boeing spent billions on share buybacks and paid out record executive bonuses. Among their demands was a 40% pay hike and the return of a defined benefit pension. International Association of Machinists District 751 President John Holden said the union would continue pushing for better terms.
You know, this wasn't enough for our members. There is a big gap that we couldn't reach, especially when it's been 16 years since we've had a chance to bargain every area of our contract. And trying to make all that up in one is very hard to do, but our members deserve more. They've spoken loudly, and we're going to go back to the table to try to achieve those things.
Boeing said it did not have an immediate comment on the vote. The strike involves 30,000 machinists in Boeing's West Coast factories and has halted production of Boeing's best-selling plane. During its quarterly earnings call on Wednesday, Boeing reported net losses of $6.2 billion in the third quarter this year and forecast it would burn cash through 2025. New CEO Kelly Ortberg warned there was no quick fix for the struggling company. Time is also running out for Boeing's suppliers. Many heavily invested in materials and tooling to support Boeing's planned ramp-up of jets, but they've also had to furlough workers in recent weeks and hold off on investments due to the strikes. One of them, Spirit Aerosystems, says a 21-day furlough of 700 workers will begin in days' time. Spirit has warned of more drastic furloughs and layoffs should the strikes continue beyond November.
Boeing shares fell just about 1% today, and this is just one day after it reported a $6 billion loss for the third quarter. Next, turbulence between Southwest Airlines and activist investor Elliott Management has cleared. The two have reached an agreement. The airline has announced that the appointment of 6 new independent directors to its board. And as part of the deal, Executive Chairman Gary Kelly will now retire earlier than expected, and CEO Bob Jordan will remain in his role. This settles a months-long proxy fight. Elliott had called for a special shareholder meeting in December to vote on its director slate, but has withdrawn the request. So with the 2024 presidential election fast approaching, U.S. businesses are suffering from election uncertainty, and that could hurt the economy. Uncertainty among small business owners has reached an all-time high since the nearly 40-year inception of a monthly survey by the National Federation of Independent Business. And experts say anxiety about the election has forced businesses of all sizes into an uncomfortable holding pattern. That pattern ultimately could negatively impact their bottom lines and the U.S. economy as a whole. An executive at the Atlanta Federal Reserve says that the blowback businesses are facing from election uncertainty should subside once the policy path ahead becomes more clear. He said at that point that we could start to see a rebound in hiring capital investments. And growing tensions between the U.S. and the International Monetary Fund over managing a global flood of Chinese exports. Today, IMF Director Kristalina Georgieva encouraged China to redirect its approach from exports to a consumer-driven economy. But the U.S. wants the IMF to make a stronger push. Listen.
We are on the view that as the Chinese economy has grown so big, it is the latter, domestic consumption, that is the reliable source of growth. We also have been keen to see China recognizing that in the short term, one big obstacle to consumer confidence is in the property sector, and a decisive action to resolve that would help lift up consumer confidence.
Georgieva shared her thoughts at the IMF and World Bank annual meetings in Washington. She said Beijing could no longer rely on an export-led model in a large economy. Meanwhile, the U.S. is blaming China's export surpluses on Beijing for holding down consumption and subsidizing manufacturing and exports. The U.S. charges China as causing collateral damage to trading partners, and it wants the IMF to take a stronger stance. Europe and the United States have imposed tariffs on Chinese imported electric vehicles to prevent the market from being flooded with cheap products. But the flood could happen anyway. Stellantis in Europe found a way to get around the legislation and work with Chinese car makers. This is a scenario that might even occur in the United States. So let's hear details from NTD's international correspondent, David Yves.
The European Union announced on July the imposition of new tariffs of up to 38% on electric vehicles imported from China to prevent the Chinese dumping in the EV market. However, Chinese manufacturers appear to have found a loophole by teaming up with European car makers. In June, Stellantis signed a $1.6 billion deal with the Chinese group Leapmotor for a joint venture. The world's fourth largest car maker plans to produce 4 EV models, including SUVs from a new factory in Poland. Stellantis began selling its new EV models in September 24th in countries like France, Italy, and Germany. Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares said the best way to compete in the EV market is to try to be Chinese ourselves. However, Stellantis European new car sales slumped 25% in September 2024, following a 48% drop in sales during the first half of 2024. The cars maker action highlight some loopholes in EU legislation.
In the end, we can't cope with dumping from abroad or from China. If China decide to dump the European market, there's nothing we can do.
President of 40 Million Drivers Association Patrick Chasseret says that the EU's protective tariffs will be circumvented at some point.
EU can't regulate market prices because when it comes down to it, electric battery technology, not to mention the research and development that's already being done in Asia on batteries alone, means that we're 100% dependent on them.
The EU Commission's tariffs follow growing concerns about EU car manufacturers. The EU has ruled that gasoline-powered car production will stop by 2035, a challenging timeline for car makers engaged in an R&D race to survive in the fully electric future of the EU car market. Chasseret says the full EV legislation is the source of the problem.
The political mistake was to focus on 100% electric cars, when in France and Europe we had technologies that would enable us to move towards carbon neutrality, other than 100% electric cars.
David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
And just a quick note here, the Stellantis CEO said the situation in the US is just a little bit different as the EV market is more protected compared to Europe. The Biden administration has imposed a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles, while EU has only a 38% tariff. However, the CEO of Stellantis believes he could circumvent US tariffs as well with EVs made in Mexico. Former President Trump has warned about this possibility and called for a 100% tariff on vehicles imported from Mexico. Next, a tale of two economies. Many economists and Fed policymakers see the economy in good shape, while everyday Americans see higher prices than before the pandemic, eclipsing wage gains. So inflation has slowed since its peak of 9% in 2022. The Labor Department reported a little over 2% in September, and this is coupled with strong employment and average wages growing faster than prices. But a recent poll by the Wall Street Journal found 3/4 of respondents believe costs for everyday goods and services have outpaced household income in the past year. A University of Michigan survey found similar results. 44% said higher prices were worsening their personal finances. Also, Apple has included a raft of new AI features in its latest beta release. Only certain software developers have gotten the new version, and we speak with them to get their thoughts. Here's the story.
Apple on Wednesday released a bunch of new Apple Intelligence features, but only for certain software developers, with a beta version of IO2 18.2. Apple says the features may be released to the public later this year. These include Image Playground,
where you can create stylized images based on prompts, or if you have like a person in your camera roll, you can put them up into the Image Playground, which is a standalone application now, and it will create a version of them of whatever you want.
YouTuber Brandon Butch shows on his channel you can tap on suggestions from a menu.
But if we want to make this, let's just say Halloween, so we'll add that into the mix, and let's add in a chef hat as a costume, and maybe one more thing. Maybe we'll add some sunglasses as well. And actually I want to change the environment. So let's go back and change the environment to maybe a desert. So we'll add all these things into one, and then this application will create an image for me.
A similar feature is Genmoji, in which users can create their own emojis with a text prompt. They can also create an emoji of themselves in a cowboy hat. Another feature, writing tools. In any app that supports this feature, Apple can give you writing suggestions, correct grammar, and rewrite your text.
You could write a nasty grammar to your boss filled with expletives and just the worst terms possible, and you can decide, oh wait, maybe I don't want that, but I want the same message. And you can tell Apple Intelligence to write that with a business perspective, with a better tone.
Apple Insider Managing Editor Michael Worthley says he thinks the writing tools will get the most use. Apple says it'll prioritize user privacy with the new features. It'll try to do as much on an account as possible and not store data.
They do have integrations with ChatGPT, which you can't necessarily say is going to have the same treatment. If you have a ChatGPT account, then ChatGPT has the right to do what they please with your query and with your results.
For its integration with ChatGPT, Apple says it'll hide users' IP address, ask for permission, not store requests, and do everything on device. But under certain settings, if you choose to use your ChatGPT account on Siri, OpenAI may be able to access data. The features may launch in December if Apple follows its previous history of launch dates.
Next, let's talk about a matchup not seen since the early 80s. So tomorrow, the New York Yankees faces the Los Angeles Dodgers in Game 1 of the World Series. If you're hoping to catch one of these historic games in person, well, tickets are out of the park. Ticket reseller Ticket IQ found the average price on the secondary market is just under $4,000, and this is the second most expensive average it has ever seen. The lowest price it could find for Game 2 in LA for about $1,100. The New York Liberty is celebrating its first WNBA championship in franchise history. Mayor Eric Adams threw a ticker tape parade for the Lady Champs through New York City today, and NTD's Sean Marshall was there. Let's take a look.
The New York Liberty Ticker Tape Parade brought out many fans to Broadway Street in New York City, also known as the Canyon of Heroes when a local team wins a championship. MVP Jonquel Jones got her own party on a float for helping lead the team to victory. Fans showed up for the New York WNBA ladies in full force, with no hesitation to show love for their hometown champs.
Go Liberty #1! You rule New York!
Woo! Came a long way. New York deserved it. Liberty brought it home. This first parade in a long time. I'm honored to be here, celebrating with the ladies. Go Liberty.
Some waited for hours just to make sure they'd have a front row spot for the parade.
It's a great day. We are waiting. It's been 2 hours. We're waiting. Let's go, women NBA. Let's go, women NBA.
Fans of all types came out. I found some young fans that watched some games this year and plan to watch many more.
Becoming season ticket holders.
The also popular mascot Elliott the Elephant, of course, had to be there. Later tonight, Mayor Eric Adams will give the team the key to the city. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
A championship Chicago Bulls jersey worn by Michael Jordan in the mid-90s is hitting the auction block. Sotheby's says the museum-quality jersey was worn by Jordan for 5 months during the 1996-97 season when Jordan was at the peak of his celebrity. He wore it in at least 17 games, including during the iconic Allen Iverson crossover moment in a March '97 game. It's one of only 2 red jerseys Jordan wore that season. It's valued at $4 to $6 million. All right, quickly, Wall Street before we go. NASDAQ and S&P 500 gained today, driven by Tesla's positive earnings. And as you can see here, the Dow Jones is mostly unchanged, down about a 0.3% here. So, market sentiment is declining despite some corporate results. And as you can see here, for the S&P 500 is mostly unchanged, up about 0.2%. And Tesla soared as well, with the EV makers set to add more than $140 billion to its market capitalization after it reported robust third quarter profits and surprised investors with a prediction of 20 to 30% sales growth next year. All right, with that, everything on Business Matters today. Back to you guys, Carrie, Fiona.
Don, what do you make of these new Apple updates?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would enjoy the feature of creating your own emojis. Basically, whatever you can think of, you just put the text into the app and then it creates one for you. But I do have other thoughts about the features where you just give it a prompt and it creates text for you. I would still prefer a human touch to that aspect. If I'm receiving an email or whatever, or a birthday invitation, I would still prefer to have some human effort put into that message.
Yeah, I agree as well with the, I believe they said there's a partnership with ChatGPT there. The privacy concerns, I mean, they're trying their best to make users feel comfortable using, but at the end of the day, I'm still a little iffy about my privacy when it comes to these things.
Well, we'll have to wait and see what happens, but looking forward to trying some of those out. Thanks, Don. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Don.